My son supports me? Are you kidding me? The words left my mouth with a force I did not even recognize. Rebecca froze in front of me, holding that folder of papers she had brought to show me her calculations of how much I should pay her to live here in my own house. I am 68 years old, and this woman who has barely been married to my son for 3 years dares to tell me that I must pay rent or look for a job to contribute because Ethan supports me. I saw how her expression of security began to crack. Her fingers squeezed the folder tighter, and a small bead of sweat appeared on her perfectly made-up temple. "Eleanor, do not get upset," she said, trying to recover that condescending tone she used so much with me. "I am just being practical. This house has expenses, and you do not contribute anything." I felt the rage rising in my throat, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had waited for this moment for months. I had endured her comments, her looks of contempt, her not-so-subtle suggestions that I was unwanted in this house. But this demand that I pay rent, this statement that my son supported me, this was the limit. "Let me ask you something, Rebecca," I said, taking a step toward her. She stepped back instinctively. "Have you ever seen the property deeds for this house?" Her face visibly paled. "I do not understand what that has to do with anything," she stuttered. "It has everything to do with it," I replied. "Because when you talk about who supports whom, when you talk about who pays, what you should know exactly whose house you are standing in." The sweat on her forehead was no longer a single drop, but several. Her eyes moved nervously from side to side, as if looking for an escape. "Ethan told me the house was in his name," she murmured with a trembling voice. "Ah, yes. Ethan told you that? How interesting. Because the papers I have kept in my room say something very different. And when I mentioned those documents, when I pronounced the word papers, I saw how the color completely disappeared from her face. But I am getting too far ahead of myself. For you to understand how we got to this moment, for you to understand why Rebecca's words hurt me so deeply, I need to tell you how this all started. I need to take you back in time to when this house was just an impossible dream and I was a widow with a small child to raise. It has been 3 months since Rebecca entered my life. 3 months since my son Ethan came home with that nervous smile and told me he had met someone special. I was happy for him. After all, he was already 32 years old, and I had started to think he would never marry. Rebecca came to dinner that first night wearing an elegant dress and bringing a bottle of expensive wine. She shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eyes, and said she had heard a lot about me. During those first weeks, everything seemed normal. Rebecca came to visit us, always polite, always smiling. She helped set the table, praised my food, asked Ethan about his work. I thought I had finally found a good woman, one who would take care of him and make him happy. How wrong I was. The wedding was small and intimate. Ethan asked me if I minded them living here for a while just until they saved enough for their own place. Of course I did not mind. This house has 3 bedrooms, and I had lived alone since he left for college. Having him back, even temporarily, filled my heart. I did not suspect anything when Rebecca started bringing her things. I did not see the red flags when she began rearranging the living room furniture. The first month was quiet. Rebecca worked in a real estate office and left early every morning. Ethan continued with his job at the construction company just like always. I kept the house clean, prepared breakfast, and made dinner. It was my way of contributing, I thought. My way of helping them as they started their life together. But things began to change subtly. First, it was small comments. "Eleanor, why do you use so much butter to cook? It is better for your health to use less." "Oh, Eleanor, I think we should buy other furniture for the living room. These are a bit outdated." I nodded, smiled, and accepted her suggestions. After all, she was young and modern. Maybe she was right. Then came the looks. Those looks that last a second too long when I enter a room. Those expressions of slight annoyance when I sit on the sofa in the afternoons. Those almost imperceptible sighs when I make coffee in the morning. I started to feel uncomfortable in my own house. but I told myself I was exaggerating, that it was my imagination. The second month, things intensified. Rebecca started making bigger changes. She replaced the living room curtains without asking me. She bought new plates and stored mine in boxes in the garage. She painted the guest room a color I did not like. When I tried to give my opinion, she smiled with exaggerated patience and said it was important for the house to feel like a home for them too. Ethan said nothing. My son, who used to tell me everything, had become distant. He arrived tired from work, ate dinner in silence, and locked himself in his room with Rebecca. When I tried to talk to him, he was always in a hurry, always had something to do. Rebecca is tired, Mom. Rebecca has a headache. Rebecca needs to rest. Rebecca, Rebecca, Rebecca. One day I found the framed photograph of my husband that had always been on the living room shelf in the trash. I took it out with trembling hands and went to look for Rebecca. She was in the kitchen making a green smoothie of the kind she drank every morning. I showed her the photo and asked why she had thrown it away. She looked at me with genuine surprise, or at least acted surprise. "Oh, Eleanor, I am so sorry. I thought it was trash. It was so old and the frame was broken. I did not know it was important. The frame was not broken. The photo was not old." But I said nothing. I just cleaned the glass, put it back in its place, and swallowed the tears that threatened to come out. That night, I heard Rebecca talking to Ethan in their room. Her voice went through the thin walls. "Your mom is getting very sensitive about nonsense. We cannot walk on eggshells because of her. This is our house, too. Our house, too." Those words haunted me for days. They made me question my place here. They made me wonder if I was really in the way, if I really should look for another place to live. But where would I go? This was my house. This house that I bought with the sweat of my brow, with years of double shifts, with the money I saved, denying myself treats to give everything to Ethan. The third month came with more changes. Rebecca invited her parents to dinner without telling me. I was in old sweatpants and without makeup when they arrived. She introduced me with that fake smile. "This is Eleanor, Ethan's mom. She lives here with us." The way she said "lives here with us" made me feel like an intruder, as if I were the guest and they were the owners. Her parents looked at me with something resembling pity. Rebecca's mother, an elegant woman with expensive jewelry, patted me on the shoulder. "How nice that Ethan is such a good son and takes care of you in your old age," she said. "In my old age. I am 68 years old, not 80. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself." But I said nothing. I just smiled and served the dinner I had prepared with the leftovers I found in the refrigerator, because no one had warned me we would have guests. That night, while washing the dishes, I heard Rebecca talking to her mother in the living room. "It is not easy, Mom, having your mother-in-law living with you. We have no privacy. We cannot decorate how we want. We cannot make plans without thinking of her." Her mother murmured something I did not catch. Then Rebecca continued. "Ethan feels guilty asking her to leave, but I think she should understand that newlyweds need their space." I felt my stomach shrink. So that was the problem. I was the problem. Rebecca wanted me to leave but did not have the courage to tell me directly. Then the silent campaign began. The comments about older people living happily in retirement homes. The articles she casually left on the dining table about the importance of independence in old age. The suggestions that I should go out more, make friends find activities. I started spending more time in my room. I got up early to make breakfast before they woke up. I cleaned when they were not home. I ate dinner quickly and retired to my room with the excuse of being tired. I tried to make myself invisible, to not be in the way, to not be a burden, but it was never enough. And so we arrived at today, to this moment, to Rebecca standing in front of me with her folder of papers, telling me I must pay rent or look for work because my son supports me, telling me that I live as a charity case in this house, telling me that I am a burden Ethan drags around out of pity. The sweat was now running freely down her face. Her hands shook, holding that folder, and I finally, after months of silence, was ready to speak my truth. The first rays of sun entered my bedroom window every morning at 5:30. I did not need an alarm. My body had already memorized that schedule after decades of waking up early. I got up slowly, feeling my joints protest with every movement. 68 years weigh heavily, even if I insisted on pretending they did not. I put on my robe and slippers in silence. The house slept at that hour, and I moved like a ghost through the hallways, taking care not to make noise. First I went to the bathroom, then to the kitchen. I turned on the coffee maker, and while the water boiled, I opened the window to let in the fresh morning air. That was my moment. Those 20 minutes before the day began were mine alone. I sat at the dining table with my cup of black coffee without sugar. The doctor had told me to watch my sugar. He had told me many things about taking care of myself, about not making excessive efforts, about resting more. But how do you rest when you have a house to maintain? How do you rest when you want to prove that you are still useful, that you still have value? I looked out the window while drinking my coffee. I watched the neighbors go out for a run, the workers heading to their jobs. Mrs. Higgins from the house across the street watering her plants. She waved at me when she saw me, and I waved back. We were of the same generation, she and I. Women who had raised families, who had worked until exhaustion, who now watched as the world spun faster and faster around us. At 6:15, I started preparing breakfast. Ethan came down at 7 before leaving for work. Rebecca appeared 10 minutes later, always perfectly groomed, with her impeccable makeup and ironed office clothes. I served him scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. Ethan ate quickly, thanked me with a kiss on the forehead, and ran out. Rebecca barely touched the food, always saying she was watching her figure, that she preferred her green smoothie. After they left, I cleaned the kitchen. I washed the dishes by hand, even though we had a dishwasher. I liked feeling the hot water. I liked the ritual of cleaning every plate, every cup, every fork. Then I dried everything and put it in its place. The place Rebecca had designated when she reorganized all the cabinets 2 months ago without asking me. The mornings passed slowly. I cleaned the house room by room. I vacuumed the living room, dusted the furniture Rebecca had bought to replace mine, arranged the decorative cushions she insisted on putting on the sofa, even though no one liked sitting on them. I cleaned the bathroom they used, picked up the damp towels Rebecca left thrown around, closed the jars of expensive creams she left open. Mid-morning, I went out to the patio. I watered the plants my husband had planted 20 years ago. Roses, geraniums, bougainvillea. Some no longer bloomed as before, but I continued to care for them with devotion. It was my connection to him, to the days when this house was full of laughter and plans for the future. When I was not invisible, when I mattered. I prepared lunch for myself alone. Ethan and Rebecca ate out at restaurants near their jobs. I made myself something simple, a soup, a sandwich, leftovers from the day before. I ate in the kitchen, watching cooking shows on the small television I had on the counter. That television had been mine since before Rebecca arrived. It was one of the few objects she had not replaced yet. The afternoons were harder. The hours stretched empty and silent. Sometimes I called my sister Sylvia, who lived in another state. We talked about our aches, about our children, about the old times. She asked me how things were going with Rebecca, and I lied. I told her everything was fine, that the girl was attentive, that Ethan was happy. I could not admit the truth, not even to my sister. Other afternoons I walked through the neighborhood. I greeted the neighbors. I stopped at the corner store to buy something needed for the house. Mr. Raymond, the store owner, always asked me about Ethan. He told me he remembered when he was a boy who came to buy candy with the coins I gave him. Those memories made me smile and hurt at the same time. I returned home before 5. Rebecca arrived before Ethan around 5:30. She entered with her phone glued to her ear, talking to her friends or clients. She did not even greet me. She went straight to her room. She changed clothes and settled in the living room with her laptop. I started preparing dinner in the kitchen, trying not to make too much noise so as not to disturb her. Ethan arrived tired around 7. He took off his dirty construction boots at the entrance and came to the kitchen. "Hi, Mom," he said without much energy. He poured himself a glass of water. Sometimes he asked me what I was cooking, but the conversation never went further. Rebecca called him from the living room, and he went to her like an obedient dog. We ate, the 3 of us together, but separated. I served the food they ate while checking their phones. Rebecca made comments about her day, about her difficult clients, about her friends. Ethan nodded and responded with monosyllables. I ate in silence, invisible at my own table. When we finished, Rebecca got up without picking up her plate and went to the living room. Ethan sometimes helped me clear the table, but lately he had stopped doing that too. I washed the dinner dishes while listening to the television in the living room. Rebecca watched her favorite shows, those series about rich people with made-up problems. Ethan sat beside her browsing on his phone. When I finished in the kitchen, I peeked into the living room to say goodnight. They barely looked up. "Good night, Mom," said Ethan. Rebecca said nothing. I retired to my room around 9. I closed the door and could finally breathe. That room was my refuge, my small space where Rebecca had not yet been able to put her hands. There were my photos, my memories, my things. The bed where I had slept with my husband for 20 years. The vanity where he had proposed to me. The rocking chair where I had nursed Ethan when he was a baby. I sat in that rocking chair every night and took out my rosary. I prayed for my husband, who rested in peace. I prayed for Ethan, for his happiness, for his marriage. I even prayed for Rebecca, asking God to soften her heart. And I prayed for myself, for strength, for patience, to know when to speak and when to be silent. Sometimes I cried in that rocking chair, silent tears that I wiped quickly with the back of my hand. I cried for the loneliness I felt surrounded by people. I cried for my son who had become a stranger. I cried for this house that no longer felt like my home. But after crying, I dried my eyes, put on my nightgown, and got into bed with the determination that tomorrow would be another day. The weekends were different, but not better. Rebecca slept late and got annoyed if I made noise in the kitchen. Ethan got up early just to go play football with his friends. I took the opportunity to do deep cleaning. I washed curtains, mopped floors, cleaned windows. I worked nonstop because if I stopped, if I sat down to rest, the thoughts came. The dark thoughts about what I had done wrong, about why my son no longer loved me as before. Rebecca went out on Saturday afternoons with her friends. She got ready for hours in front of the mirror, trying on different outfits, different hairstyles. I watched her from the door of my room and remembered when I, too, was young and got ready like that to go out with my husband. But those days were so far behind, they seemed like another life, another person. On Sundays, Rebecca insisted we go out to eat, the three of us. As a family, she said. I dressed in my best clothes, combed my hair, carefully put on a little lipstick. But at the restaurant, I felt out of place. Rebecca chose expensive places where the waiters looked at me like I did not belong. She ordered dishes I did not know, wines that cost more than I spent on food in a week. Ethan paid the bill without blinking. I saw him take out his credit card and sign the receipt with those numbers that made me dizzy. $120 for a meal, $150, $200. I thought of all the times I had divided a chicken between 3 meals when Ethan was a child, of all the times I had bought the cheapest brand of everything to be able to pay the bills. And now he spent on a single meal what I spent in 2 weeks. But I said nothing. I smiled and thanked them and pretended to enjoy those lunches where Rebecca talked nonstop and Ethan nodded, and I was just another piece of furniture at the table. Afterwards, we returned home, and they locked themselves in their room to watch movies or do whatever they did. I stayed in the living room watching my own shows, feeling the weight of the silence. This was my life now. This endless routine of cleaning, cooking, trying not to be in the way, being useful without being seen existing, without bothering. I had accepted this role because I loved my son, because I wanted him to be happy, because I thought it was my duty as a mother to adapt to his new life. But every day was harder. Every day I felt smaller, more invisible, more useless. At night in my rocking chair, I wondered how much longer I could go on like this. How much longer before Rebecca asked me directly to leave, or worse, before Ethan did. That idea terrified me more than anything else. The idea that my own son, the boy who had grown in my womb, who had nursed at my breast, who had learned to walk holding my hands, would tell me he no longer wanted me here. And then that day arrived. That day that started like all the others. Me folding towels in the living room, Rebecca arriving with her attitude of lady and mistress. And those words that changed everything. Your son supports you. You live on charity. You must pay rent. As if all those years had not existed. As if all my sacrifice was worth nothing. As if I was nothing. The story of this house began 25 years ago, when I was a 43-year-old woman recently widowed with a 7-year-old son. My husband had died in a work accident falling from a scaffold on a construction site. The compensation I received was miserable. $10,000 that vanished in the funeral, the medical debts he had left, and the first months of survival. I worked cleaning houses during the day. 5 different houses, 5 days a week. They paid me $50 per house, sometimes $60 if the cleaning was deeper, $250 a week, $1,000 a month if I was lucky, and no client got sick or canceled for vacation. With that, I had to pay the rent for our small 2-bedroom apartment food utilities, Ethan's clothes growing so fast that his pants were short every 6 months. At night, I worked in a laundry, from 6 in the evening to 11 at night, 5 days a week, folding hotel sheets, ironing business shirts, packing restaurant uniforms. They paid me $9 an hour, $45 a night, $225 a week, almost $900 a month. Adding both jobs, I earned approximately $1,900 monthly. The rent for the apartment was $600, the utilities another $150. Food, being very careful, buying only what was necessary using coupons, looking for offers, cost me around $300 a month. Ethan's clothes, school, supplies, medical expenses when he got sick, the bus fare to get to and from work, all that added another $400 monthly. I had $450 left that I religiously saved in a savings account. Ethan spent the afternoons after school with Mrs. Higgins, our neighbor, an older woman who charged me $5 a day to watch him, $35 a week, $140 a month. But it was that, or leave him alone in the apartment, and I preferred to die before putting my son in danger. Mrs. Higgins gave him a snack, helped him with his homework, kept him safe until I arrived from my first job. I arrived from the cleaning job at 5:30. I picked up Ethan. We prepared dinner together. He told me about his day at school while I cooked with what was in the refrigerator: rice and beans, noodle soup, scrambled eggs. Nothing elaborate, nothing expensive. We ate together at our small table. I listened to his stories about his friends, about his teachers, about his dreams. At 5:45, I ran to the laundry. Ethan stayed alone those 5 hours. He was 8 years old, then 9, then 10. Too small to stay alone, but there was no alternative. I left written instructions on the refrigerator door. Do not open the door to anyone. Do not use the stove. Do your homework. Watch television. Go to bed at 9. Mrs. Higgins was looking out from her apartment next door, but still I died of worry every night. I arrived home at 11:30 at night. Ethan was already asleep. I entered his room on tiptoes, tucked him in, gave him a kiss on the forehead. Then I showered, put on my pajamas, and fell exhausted into my bed. 4 or 5 hours of sleep before the alarm went off at 5 in the morning to start all over again. On weekends, I worked cleaning houses too. But those days, Ethan came with me. The clients did not know I brought my son. He stayed waiting outside or in the car when it was very hot. He brought his books, his toys, his lunchbox. He was an obedient child. He never complained. He never asked me why we did not have what other children had, why we did not go to the movies, why we did not eat in restaurants, why his clothes were secondhand. That is how 3 years passed, 3 years saving every penny I could. $450 a month became $16,200. But it was not enough for a down payment on a house. I needed at least $25,000, so I got a third job. Sunday mornings, I cleaned a church. They paid me $70, $280 a month, $2,800 a year. Ethan was 11 years old when I finally gathered the $25,000. $25,000 that had taken almost 4 years of my life. 4 years without vacations, without rest, without spending a single penny on myself. My clothes were the same as always, mended again and again. My shoes had holes in the soles that I covered with cardboard. I did not cut my hair in salons, but cut it myself in front of the bathroom mirror. I went looking for houses with a real estate agent, a man named Hector, who treated me with condescension because he knew I did not have much money. He showed me houses in the worst neighborhoods, houses that needed major repairs, houses with leaking roofs, with plumbing problems, with cracks in the walls. But they were houses. They were mine if I could pay for them. I found this house, a 3-bedroom construction in a working-class neighborhood. It was not new. It was 30 years old. The paint was peeling. The garden was a mess. The kitchen had old cabinets and appliances from the 70s, but it was a good size. It had solid structure. It had potential, and it cost $95,000. With my $25,000 down payment, I needed a loan of $70,000. I went to 4 different banks. Everyone rejected me. A single woman with 2 low-paying jobs with no solid credit history was too much risk. The 5th bank, a small credit union, finally approved me, but with an interest rate of 8.5%. My monthly payment would be $540 for 30 years. I signed the papers with trembling hands. The loan was only in my name, Eleanor Sullivan. The house was registered only in my name, Eleanor Sullivan. It was my house, mine. The first thing I truly owned since my husband had died. I cried when they gave me the keys. I cried with relief, with happiness, with terror, for the responsibility I had just assumed. We moved with the little we had. A borrowed truck was enough to transport our furniture. Ethan's bed, my bed, the dining table, the old sofa, the small television, boxes with clothes, with dishes, with pots. We did not have much, but it was ours, and now we had a house to put everything. The first years were difficult. $540 mortgage, plus utilities, which were now higher because the house was bigger, plus maintenance because things broke constantly. The water heater broke down the first winter. I had to pay $400 for a new one. The roof started leaking during a storm. Another $600 in repairs. But I kept working. 3 jobs. Ethan grew. At 13, he could stay alone without worry. At 14, he got his first job delivering newspapers in the mornings before school. He earned $50 a week that I made him save for his education. At 16, he worked in a supermarket on weekends. $100 a week. Half he saved, half he spent on his things. I left the laundry job when Ethan was 15. My hands could not take it anymore. The doctor told me I had arthritis from so much ironing, so much folding, so much lifting weight. I focused only on cleaning houses but got more clients. 8 houses a week, $400 a week, $1,600 a month. With that, I paid the mortgage, utilities, food, whatever was needed. Ethan graduated high school with good grades. I got him a partial scholarship to community college. He studied civil engineering. He worked part-time in construction during the summer. I kept cleaning houses to pay what the scholarship did not cover. Books, materials, transportation, another $300 a month coming out of my pocket. He graduated at 22. He got a job at a major construction company. He started earning $3,000 a month. Good money. I was so proud. He continued living with me because he said he wanted to save for his future. I did not charge him rent. I did not ask him to pay utilities. I just asked him to help me occasionally with house repairs. During those years, I paid my mortgage without fail. I never missed a single month. $540 every month for 25 years. In total, I had paid $162,000 for a house that had cost $95,000. That is how bank loans work. You pay almost double for the interest. By the time Ethan turned 30, I only had 5 years left to pay off the house. 70 more months of $540. $37,800 to fully own my house. I was already 63 years old. I still cleaned houses, although not as many. My body could not withstand the same pace. 5 houses a week instead of 8. But it was enough. Then Ethan met Rebecca, and everything began to change. He told me they would get married, that they would live here temporarily. I accepted because he was my son, because I thought it would be good to have company, because I never imagined that she would see this house as hers, that she would treat me like an intruder, that she would make me feel like I lived on charity in the place I had bought with my blood and sweat. Now, 3 years later, the house was finally paid off. The last payment I had made 2 months ago. $187,000 I had paid in total for this property. Every penny had come from my working hands, from my knees ruined from kneeling so much to clean floors, from my back that hurt constantly from carrying buckets and vacuums so much, from my hands deformed by arthritis from so much scrubbing and polishing. This house was mine, legally, morally, in every possible sense. The papers were in my safe, in my room, deed in the name of Eleanor Sullivan, without any other name, without Ethan, without Rebecca, just me. And now this woman, this girl who had entered my life barely 3 years ago, told me to pay rent, that my son supported me, that I lived on charity. Rebecca came into our lives on an October afternoon. Ethan had left early that Saturday, telling me he had plans with friends. He returned at 7 in the evening with a smile I had not seen on him since he was a teenager. "Mom, I want to introduce you to someone," he said, with nervousness in his voice. And there she was, standing at the door in a tight white dress and heels that made her look taller than she was. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Sullivan," she said, extending her hand firmly. "I am Rebecca Fields. Ethan has told me so much about you." Her grip was strong, almost aggressive. Her eyes scanned me up and down in a second, evaluating me, cataloging me. I was wearing my house clothes, some old pants, and a faded blouse. I felt small under her gaze. Come in," I said, stepping aside. Rebecca entered, looking at every corner of the living room with that expression I would later learn to recognize. It was judgment disguised as interest. Her eyes stopped on the worn sofa, on the curtains I had sewn myself 10 years ago, on the framed photographs on the shelf. "What a cozy house," she said, but the tone did not sound sincere. Ethan was beaming. He told me they had met 3 months ago at a work event. She was real estate people. She sold houses to people with money, people who could pay a $50,000 down payment without blinking, people who bought properties like one buys shoes. I nodded while he spoke, watching how he looked at her with adoration, how she touched his arm possessively every time he said something. I made coffee and brought out some cookies I had baked that morning. Rebecca took the cup delicately but did not taste the cookies. "I'm watching my diet," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Ethan took 3 cookies and devoured them, telling me they were the best in the world. Rebecca looked at him with slight disapproval. The conversation was awkward. Rebecca talked about her job, about the houses she sold, about the important clients she had. $300,000 houses, 500,000, 1 million. Numbers that sounded unreal to me. She talked about those amounts as if they were nothing, as if we all handled that kind of money. I listened in silence, feeling how every word marked the distance between her world and mine. "And what do you do, Mrs. Sullivan?" she asked finally. "I clean houses," I answered without shame. "I have cleaned houses for 25 years. Rebecca nodded slowly, her expression changing subtly. "Ah, what noble work," she said, but there was condescension in her voice. "Someone has to do that job, right?" My son shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ethan quickly changed the subject, asking me about my day, about the neighbors, about anything that steered the conversation away from my job. But the damage was done. Rebecca had categorized my value in that moment. I was the lady who cleaned houses. She was the professional who sold them. We were from different worlds, and her attitude made it clear she considered herself far above mine. That first visit lasted 2 hours. When they finally left, I picked up the coffee cups with trembling hands. There was something about Rebecca that unsettled me. It was not just her arrogance or her superior attitude. It was something deeper. It was the way she looked at Ethan as if he were a possession. the way she had observed my house, as if she were already calculating how to improve it, how to change it, how to make it hers. Visits became more frequent, twice a week at first, then 3, then 4. Rebecca always arrived with something: a bottle of $100 wine, imported cheeses I did not know how to pronounce, desserts from expensive bakeries that cost $20 a slice. I saw it as a waste, but Ethan was delighted with her attentions. She started making comments about the house, casual as if she were just making conversation. "This living room has a lot of potential," she said, looking around. "With the right decoration, it could look very modern. Oh, the color of these walls is very outdated. A more neutral tone would make the space look bigger." I nodded without saying anything, but every comment was a small criticism of everything I had built. One day, she arrived with furniture catalogs. She put them on the dining table and began showing Ethan her choices. "Look at this sofa. It is perfect for the living room. And this dining table, imagine the dinners we could have here." I was in the kitchen, but I could hear her. "We could," she said, as if she already lived here, as if this house were already hers. Ethan asked me that night what I thought of Rebecca. We were alone. She had left an hour ago. "If she makes you happy, son, then she makes me happy," I replied. But deep down, something gnawed at me. Something told me this woman did not come with good intentions, that she saw my son not for who he was, but for what he could give her, for the stability, for the house where he lived, for the life she wanted to build. The marriage proposal came 6 months after they met. Ethan told me with tears in his eyes. He had asked Rebecca to marry him, and she had said yes. I hugged him and congratulated him, because it was my duty as a mother to support him. But that night, I cried in my room. I cried because I knew I was losing my son, because once he married her, I would move to the background. I would become a nuisance. The wedding was small but expensive. Rebecca insisted it be in an elegant hall. Ethan paid $15,000 for a party of 80 people. $15,000 he had saved for years. I wore a dress I bought at a thrift store for $30. Rebecca wore a designer dress that cost $3,000. The difference between us was never more obvious. During the reception, Rebecca's parents sat at the main table. I was at a side table with distant relatives of Ethan I barely knew. Rebecca danced with her father, with Ethan with her friends. I sat watching the party as a spectator of my own son's life. When he asked me to dance well into the night, it was out of obligation, because someone reminded him he should dance with his mother. "Mom, I am so happy," he told me while we danced. "Rebecca is amazing. We are going to have a wonderful life together." I smiled and nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say, the warnings I wanted to give him, the motherly instinct screaming at me that something was not right. But how do you tell your son on his wedding day that you think his wife is not a good person? How do you destroy his happiness based on a feeling? The honeymoon was in Cancun, a week at a resort all-inclusive that cost $4,000. I stayed alone in the house enjoying the peace, but also feeling the emptiness. This was the calm before the storm. When they returned, Rebecca would come to live here, and my life would change forever. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon, tanned, relaxed, happy. Rebecca brought 4 suitcases full of clothes. "It is just temporary," Mom Ethan assured me, "just until we save for our own house." Rebecca smiled, but her eyes said otherwise. They said it was not temporary. They said this house was now hers. The first week was adjustments. Rebecca arranged her clothes in Ethan's closet. She put her beauty products in the bathroom. Her expensive shoes filled the shoe rack. I backed away, making myself small, leaving her space, trying not to be in the way in my own house. The second week, the suggestions began. "Eleanor, do not you think we should change those curtains? They are very out of style." "Oh, Eleanor, have you thought about painting the living room? This yellow color is very depressing." I answered that I would think about it, that I would consider it, knowing I had no money for those changes, knowing she knew it too. The third week, the suggestions turned into actions. She arrived one day with new curtains. She hung them without asking me. "They cost $200, she said proudly. "Ethan paid for them, of course." I looked at my old yellow curtains, the ones I had sewn with my own hands thrown in a trash bag. I felt as if a piece of me had been thrown away. Within a month, she had replaced half the living room furniture. The sofa where Ethan had grown up, where we had watched movies together, where I had comforted his childhood nightmares, was sold at a garage sale for $50. Rebecca bought a new one for $2,500. More modern, she said, more appropriate for a young couple. I started feeling strange in my own living room. The new furniture had no history, no memory. It was pretty, yes. Expensive, yes, but it was not mine. It did not have the marks of life lived. It did not have the wear of years of loving use. It was sterile, like Rebecca. Beautiful on the outside, but cold on the inside. Ethan did not seem to notice my discomfort. He was too busy pleasing his wife. He worked more hours to pay for all her purchases. He arrived, tired, ate, quickly went to sleep. The Sundays we used to spend together, he now spent with Rebecca. They went out to eat, went to the movies, visited her parents. I stayed home alone cleaning the new furniture. I had not chosen cooking meals no one appreciated. The months passed like this, Rebecca taking more control, me ceding more ground, until we reached this point. To this moment where she dares to tell me to pay rent, where she has the nerve to claim my son supports me, where she believes she has the right to dictate my life in the house I bought with my sacrifice. And there I was finally ready to defend what was mine. Rebecca's comments became part of my daily routine, like morning coffee or the pain in my knees. They were constant, predictable, poisonous. "Eleanor, why do you cook with so much grease? Ethan needs to watch his health. Eleanor, do not you think you should fix yourself up a little more? Women your age cannot let themselves go like that. Eleanor, when was the last time you left the house? It is not healthy to be locked up all day." Every word was a small stab. She did not yell. She did not insult openly. She was too smart for that. Her attacks were subtle, wrapped in fake concern, disguised as well-intentioned advice. But I felt the poison behind every phrase. I felt myself becoming smaller with every comment. One morning I made breakfast as usual. Scrambled eggs with ham, hash browns, fresh toast. Ethan came down first and sat down hungry. Rebecca appeared 10 minutes later, already perfectly made up and dressed for work. She looked at the plate I had served with barely concealed disgust. "Eleanor, did you make this with butter?" she asked, lifting a fork and examining the eggs as if they were poison. "I cannot eat so much fat in the morning. It ruins my diet. Ethan, you should not eat like that either. Look, you are getting a belly." She patted my son's stomach. He looked ashamed and pushed the half-finished plate away. I remained standing by the stove with the spatula still in my hand. I had gotten up early to make them a hot breakfast. I had used the last eggs left in the refrigerator, and she rejected it as if I had served her garbage. "I can make you something else," I offered with a calm voice. Rebecca sighed with impatience. "Do not worry, I will make my green smoothie as always. It is the only thing I really need in the mornings." She took out her expensive blender, the one she had bought that took up half the kitchen counter. She started putting in spinach, banana, protein powder, almond milk, ingredients that cost triple what I spent on normal food. The noise of the blender filled the kitchen. I threw away the eggs Ethan had left on the plate. Wasted food, wasted effort. The comments about my appearance were especially cruel. "Eleanor, have you thought about dyeing your hair? The gray makes you look very old. Oh, Eleanor, you should wear more modern clothes. Those pants look like they are from the 80s. I looked at my reflection in the mirror after every comment. My gray hair I had decided to leave natural. My comfortable clothes I had worn for years. Was it so bad? Was I really so ugly? One Saturday, Rebecca insisted on taking me shopping. "Do you need to update your wardrobe?" she declared. "You cannot keep dressing like a grandma." We went to a department store where everything cost more than I earned in a week cleaning houses. She chose clothes for me without asking what I liked. Tight blouses that were not my style, uncomfortable pants, shoes with heels I knew I could not wear because of my arthritis. "This fits you perfectly," she said, holding up a bright pink blouse against me. "It makes you look younger." I tried on the clothes, feeling how nothing fit right. Everything was for a different body than mine, a younger body, thinner, without the marks of 68 years of life. Rebecca ended up buying me 3 outfits that cost $400. Ethan paid with his card without blinking. At home, she forced me to put on one of the outfits to show Ethan. I felt costumed as if I were wearing someone else's clothes. My son looked at me and smiled without much enthusiasm. "You look good, Mom," he said distractedly before returning to his phone. Rebecca nodded, satisfied. "You see, you just needed a little help to look presentable." Presentable. As if before I had been a disaster. As if my way of dressing all my life had been shameful. That night, I hung the new clothes in my closet and put my old, comfortable pajamas back on. The expensive clothes stayed hanging for weeks without me touching them. Eventually, Rebecca realized and started making comments. "We bought you new clothes and you do not even wear them. What a waste of money." The criticism extended to everything I did. My cleaning was not deep enough. My cooking was outdated and unhealthy. My way of speaking was too simple. "Eleanor, do not say ain't. Eleanor, do not chew with your mouth open. Eleanor, do not talk so loud when I am on important calls." I became a child being constantly scolded. In my own house at 68 years old, Ethan never defended me. When I tried to explain or justify myself, he asked me not to make drama. "Rebecca is just trying to help you. Mom, do not take it personal." But how not to take it personal when every part of my being was being criticized? The weekends were particularly difficult. Rebecca invited her friends for coffee in my living room. They arrived with their designer bags and conversations about spas and trips to Europe. I served the coffee and snacks Rebecca had bought. They treated me like the maid. "Thank you," they said without looking at me. Or they simply ignored my existence while I picked up their empty cups. Once one of her friends asked who I was. Rebecca answered with a casual voice. "Oh, she is my husband's mom. She lives with us." She did not say it was my house. She did not say she was the one living with me. She flipped the roles completely, and her friends nodded with expressions of pity. "How generous you are to take care of her," said one. "Not all children do that for their aging parents." I left the living room, hands trembling. I locked myself in my room and cried. I cried from humiliation. I cried from contained rage. I cried because every day I felt more invisible, more useless, more like a burden, and no one seemed to notice my pain, or if they noticed, they did not care enough to do something about it. The straw that broke the camel's back before the final confrontation came one Sunday afternoon. Rebecca had organized a family gathering without consulting me. She invited her parents, her older sister with her husband, and 2 of her cousins. She also invited my sister Sylvia, who lived 2 hours away and whom I had not seen for months. I found out about all this just Friday night. "Eleanor, you will need to prepare food for 12 people on Sunday," she informed me while checking her phone on the sofa. "My parents are coming at 2 in the afternoon. Make sure everything is perfect." I was folding clothes at that moment, and her words fell on me like cold water. Sunday? This Sunday? Rebecca. I do not have time to prepare for so many people with only 2 days' notice. She looked up with an annoyed expression. "Why not? It is not like you have other things to do. Besides, it is just food. I am not asking for anything extravagant. Something traditional is fine." Her words burned me. Just food, as if cooking for 12 people was something simple, as if my time was worth nothing, as if I had no right to refuse. Ethan was in the room but said nothing. He played deaf while his wife gave me orders in my own house. I pressed my lips together and nodded because what else could I do? Refusing would mean creating conflict. It would mean being the difficult mother-in-law, the one who ruins family harmony. So I accepted, as I always accepted everything. Saturday, I got up at 5 in the morning and went to the market. I bought chicken, beef, vegetables, ingredients to make 3 different casseroles, rice beans, handmade rolls. I spent $120 of my own money because Rebecca had not given me a single penny for the purchase. Upon returning home loaded with bags, she was drinking her green smoothie without offering help. I spent all Saturday cooking. I prepared pot roast, I prepared mashed potatoes, I prepared green bean casserole, I made red rice baked beans, fresh guacamole. My hands hurt from so much chopping and stirring. My back screamed at me from standing so many hours. At 10 at night, I was still in the kitchen finishing the last details. Rebecca entered to get water and looked at everything with a critical expression. "I hope the food is not too spicy," she said. "My family does not like very spicy food, and make sure everything is well presented. My parents are very particular about those things." I nodded without looking at her hands, submerged in soapy water, washing the pots I had used. She left the kitchen without offering to help even once. Sunday, I got up even earlier to finish preparations. I cleaned the house top to bottom. I took out the good plates, the ones we never used. I set the table with a tablecloth and cloth napkins I ironed carefully. I arranged fresh flowers in a vase. I heated all the food and served it in nice platters. By 1 in the afternoon, I was exhausted, but everything was ready. Rebecca came down at 1:30, already dressed in an elegant dress and high heels. She inspected everything with a critical eye. She moved the vase 2 centimeters to the left, adjusted a napkin that, according to her, was crooked, tasted the roast with a spoon and wrinkled her nose. "It is a little salty," she said, "but I suppose it will have to do." The guests started arriving at 2 sharp. Rebecca's parents were the first, Mr. Leonard Davis and his wife Olivia. He was a large man with a gold watch and the attitude of someone used to being obeyed. She was thin and elegant, with perfectly coiffed hair and jewelry that probably cost more than my car. They greeted me coldly, shaking my hand briefly before heading to the living room. Then came Rebecca's sister, Tanya, with her husband, Julius. They were younger, perhaps 35, both dressed in expensive clothes and arrogant attitudes. Rebecca's cousins arrived together, 2 women in their 20s, who did not stop checking their phones. And finally, my sister Sylvia arrived, who hugged me tight and whispered in my ear that I looked tired. Rebecca did the honors as hostess, as if the house were hers. She offered drinks, indicated where to sit, made conversation. I stayed in the kitchen, serving plates, filling glasses, bringing more hot rolls. No one thanked me. No one noticed the effort. It was as if I were part of the furniture. During the meal, I sat at the corner of the table in the only spot left available. I was between one of the cousins, who did not stop texting, and Tanya's husband, who spoke loudly about his new investment business. I ate in silence, listening to the conversations around me. Rebecca's parents talked about their last vacation in Spain. Tanya bragged about the new house they had just bought. The cousins discussed which brand of bags was better. Then Leonard looked around the table and said loudly, "This house is very cozy, Ethan. You did well buying it." The words hung in the air. I stopped chewing. I felt the blood rising to my face. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, actually," he began to say, but Rebecca interrupted him quickly. "Yes, Dad. Ethan works very hard to maintain this home. He's been a great provider." She looked at my son with fake adoration. He smiled weakly and did not correct the information. He did not say the house was mine. He did not say he only lived here. He stayed silent, allowing his father-in-law and everyone present to believe he was the owner. My sister Sylvia looked at me from the other side of the table. Her eyes were full of questions. She knew the truth. She had been with me during all those years of sacrifice to buy this house. But she said nothing. It was not her place to contradict Rebecca at her own family gathering. Olivia, Rebecca's mother, took a sip of wine and looked at me condescendingly. "Eleanor, you must be very grateful to have such a responsible son. Not all children take care of their aging mothers like this. It is a blessing to live with them instead of being alone somewhere." Her words were sweet, but the message was clear. I was the old mother being supported by her generous son. Rebecca nodded emphatically. "That is right, Mom. Ethan has a heart of gold. He always thinks of his mother first, although sometimes it is hard. Right, love? Not having privacy when you are newlyweds, but he never complains." She turned to me with that fake smile. You are lucky to have him, Eleanor." I felt something inside me begin to break. It was not just the lie about the house. It was the way everyone looked at me with pity. It was the way they had turned me into a charity case, into the helpless old woman who depended on her son to have a roof over her head. I squeezed the fork so hard my knuckles turned white. Tanya added her comment. "My husband and I have talked about what we will do when our parents age. It is a big responsibility to care for them." She looked at Julius, who nodded gravely. "But it is the right thing, I guess, although it definitely affects your couple life." She looked significantly at Ethan and Rebecca. The cousins laughed among themselves. One of them said in a barely audible voice, but that we all heard, "I could not live with my mother-in-law. I would prefer to die." The other elbowed her, but they laughed as if she had said the funniest joke in the world. I felt my cheeks burning, my hands trembling. Leonard wiped his mouth with the napkin. "The food is good, Eleanor. You have a talent for cooking. At least you can contribute that way, right? With cooking and cleaning, it is important that everyone contributes their part in a household." He raised his wine glass in my direction as if paying me a compliment. I could not take it anymore. I got up from the table abruptly. My chair scraped the floor, making a loud noise. Everyone fell silent, looking at me. "Excuse me," I murmured. "I need to get more water." I went out to the kitchen with quick steps, feeling all eyes stuck to my back. In the kitchen, I leaned against the sink with trembling hands. I breathed heavily, trying to control the rage bubbling inside me. My sister Sylvia entered behind me and closed the door. "Eleanor, are you okay?" she asked with concern. She put her hand on my shoulder. I shook my head. "No, Sylvia, I am not okay. Did you hear what they said? Did you hear how they talk about me as if I were a burden? As if I lived on charity in my own house?" My sister hugged me tight. "I know, but you know the truth. That is what matters." "But it is not enough, Sylvia. I have worked all my life for this house. I have paid every penny. And now they treat me as if Ethan were doing me a favor, letting me live here. As if I should be grateful. It is humiliating." The tears finally flowed. I cried in my sister's arms, while in the dining room the cheerful conversation of people who saw me as insignificant continued. The days after that family gathering were tense and silent. I moved through the house like a ghost doing my chores without saying a word. Rebecca noticed my change in attitude, but interpreted it as a victory. She'd put me in my place in front of her whole family, and now I was being obedient. That was what she believed. But in reality, something had changed inside me. Every humiliating comment, every look of pity from her relatives, every word that painted Ethan as my savior, all that had ignited a spark that had been fading for months. It was no longer sadness I felt. It was rage, a cold and calculated rage that grew every day. Rebecca began to press more, as if she felt I had finally broken, and now she could demand whatever she wanted. One Tuesday afternoon, while I ironed clothes in the living room, she sat in front of me with her laptop and a notebook. "Eleanor, we need to talk about something important," she said with that business tone she used with her clients. "I have been doing the accounts of the household expenses. Electricity has gone up because now we are 3 people. Water, too. Food obviously costs more. And frankly, it is not fair for Ethan to carry all that alone." I left the iron on the board and looked at her without saying anything. She continued sliding her finger on her laptop screen. "I have calculated that your personal expenses total approximately $500 a month. That includes your portion of utilities, food, and the space you occupy. I think it is a reasonable amount you could contribute." "$500? I repeated slowly. Rebecca nodded as if she were being tremendously generous. "Yes, or if you prefer, you could look for a part-time job. I know at your age it is complicated, but I know places that hire older ladies for cleaning or childcare. With 3 or 4 days of work a week, you could raise that amount easily." I felt my blood boil but kept my voice calm. "And if I cannot pay that amount?" Rebecca sighed as if the question tired her. Well, then we would have to consider other options. There are residences for seniors that are very nice, even some subsidized by the government if you do not have resources. It would not be so bad, Eleanor. You would meet people your age. You would have activities you would be taken care of. Are you asking me to leave? The words came out harder than I intended. Rebecca raised her hands in a defensive gesture. No, no one is kicking you out. I am just being practical about the situation. Ethan and I want to start a family soon. We need space, we need privacy, and we need the household finances to be balanced. It is nothing personal. Everything was personal. Every word was a direct attack on my existence in this house, on my value as a person, on my right to be here. I picked up the iron again and continued my work without answering her. Rebecca closed her laptop with a sharp snap. Think about it, Eleanor. I give you a week to decide what you are going to do, but this cannot go on indefinitely. That night, Ethan arrived late from work. He ate alone because Rebecca and I had already eaten. I was washing dishes when he approached and leaned against the counter. Mom Rebecca told me you talked today, he said with an uncomfortable voice, about contributing to the household expenses. I froze with my hands in the soapy water. And what do you think, son? He shifted restlessly. Well, she is right that expenses have increased, and I work many hours to cover it all. It would not be bad if you contributed something, even a small amount, just to help. I turned to look at him, this 32-year-old man who had been my baby, who had grown supported by my effort, who had studied with the money I earned, cleaning other people's floors, and now he was asking me to pay rent in my own house. Do you really think I do not contribute anything, Ethan? I asked with a broken voice. He avoided my gaze. I did not say that, Mom, but you have to understand that Rebecca and I have plans. We want to have children. We want to travel. We need to save. And you could help a little, right? We are not asking for much, just $500 a month. Or if you cannot pay, you could do more things around the house. Clean deeper, cook all the meals, wash our clothes. Something to balance things out. Something to balance things out. As if I did not spend every day cleaning, cooking, washing. As if my work was worth nothing because it did not come with a paycheck. I nodded slowly and went back to the dishes. I understand, I said with a neutral voice. Let me think about it. The following days, Rebecca intensified her campaign. She left brochures for senior homes on the dining table. She made comments about how liberating it would be for me to have my own space, how happy everyone would be if each lived their life independently. Her friends came and talked in front of me about their mothers-in-law who lived alone and how well they were doing. One afternoon, while I folded towels in my room, I heard Rebecca talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice went through the thin walls. Yes, Mom, she is still here. No, she has not said anything about leaving. She is incredibly stubborn. She paused, listening. I know. Ethan is too good. He does not dare ask her directly to leave because he feels guilty. But I am not going to live like this forever. We need our privacy. Another pause. I am considering giving her an ultimatum. Either she pays rent or she leaves. She cannot keep living on charity indefinitely. She is a grown woman. She should be able to support herself. Laughter, exactly. She already had her chance to raise her son. Now it is our turn to live our life without her watching everything we do. I sat on my bed with the towels half folded in my lap. Rebecca's words confirmed everything I had feared. It was not just about money. It was about kicking me out of my own house. It was about erasing me from my son's life. It was about taking complete control of everything I had built. On Friday night, exactly a week after her initial conversation, Rebecca summoned me to the living room. Ethan was present, sitting on the new sofa she had bought, looking at his hands with guilt. Rebecca was standing arms crossed in a position of power. Eleanor, it has been a week. She started with a firm voice. Have you thought about what we talked about? About your contribution to the household expenses? I was sitting in the chair that used to be my favorite spot, but now felt like the accused's bench. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something to defend me, to protect me, as I had protected him all his life. But he continued looking at his hands in silence. "I have thought a lot," I finally replied. Rebecca felt satisfied, anticipating that I would yield to her demands. "Good. So you are going to get a job, or you are going to pay from your savings. It does not matter which you choose as long as it is consistent every month." Before I could answer, she continued, "And since we are discussing this, there is another thing. Ethan and I have decided we are going to remodel the house. Your room would be perfect as a nursery when we have the baby, so we will need you to move to the smaller room in the back, the one we use as storage. You will have to get rid of some furniture because not everything will fit, but it is a necessary sacrifice." My room. The room I had shared with my husband, where I had slept for 25 years, where all my memories were. And she wanted to turn it into a baby room. She wanted to relegate me to the smallest room in the house as if I were a second-class tenant. Besides, Rebecca continued, not perceiving my silence as dangerous, "We are going to need to establish some rules of coexistence. No cooking with strong smells that permeate the house. No watching television in the living room after 9 at night because we need privacy. And when we have guests, it would be better if you stayed in your room so as not to make our guests uncomfortable." Every word was one more nail in my coffin. Every demand was more absurd than the last. And my son was still sitting there in silence, allowing his wife to humiliate me this way. Rebecca took out a folder she had prepared. "Here I have everything in writing. The $500 monthly you must pay, the house rules, the moving schedule to the other room. I just need you to sign here so everything is documented." She extended the folder and a pen to me. I looked at her without taking it. Rebecca frowned with impatience. "Eleanor, do not make this harder than necessary. We are being very reasonable. Many families do not even allow their elderly parents to live with them. You should be grateful we are giving you options." Grateful. That word was the final straw. I stood up slowly, feeling every muscle in my body trembling, not from weakness, but from contained fury. Rebecca took a step back instinctively. Something in my expression alerted her. "Eleanor, do not get dramatic," she said, trying to regain her authoritative tone. But I was no longer listening to her. I could no longer contain myself. The weeks of humiliation, the months of being treated like a burden, the years of sacrifice no one valued, everything exploded in that moment. And finally, I was ready to speak my truth. "My son supports me?" The words left my mouth with a force that made Rebecca step back another pace. "Are you kidding me?" I repeated, my voice rising in volume with every syllable. She opened her mouth to answer, but I raised my hand, stopping her. "No, do not say another word. You have spoken enough for months. Now it is my turn." Ethan stood up alarmed. "Mom, calm down. It is not necessary to make a scene." I looked at him with a mixture of pain and disappointment that made him recoil. "A scene? Is that what you think this is? Your wife just asked me to pay $500 rent to move to the broom closet to hide when you have guests, and you think I am the one making a scene." Rebecca regained some composure. "Eleanor, I understand you are upset, but these are decisions Ethan and I have made together. This is our house, and we have the right to set rules." I spun toward her so fast I almost tripped. "Their house? Did you say their house?" "Yes, our house. Ethan's and mine." Rebecca crossed her arms over her chest, trying to look confident, but I saw her hands trembling slightly. "Ethan works very hard to maintain this home, and I also contribute. You are the one who lives here without paying anything." I approached her slowly. "Rebecca, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen the property deeds for this house?" She blinked, confused. "What? Of course. They are in Ethan's study. Why?" I laughed humorlessly. "Have you seen them? Have you really seen them? Or did you just assume they were in my son's name?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, I do not understand where you are going with this. I turned to him with tears of rage in my eyes. Do not understand. Do you really not understand, or have you simply preferred not to tell your wife the truth? He turned pale. It is just that the subject never came up. Rebecca looked at both of us with growing confusion and unease. What are you talking about? Ethan, what is it that never came up? Her voice went up an octave. What have you not told me? My son opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Guilt was written in every line of his face. I brought out the words I had kept for so long. This house is not Ethan's, Rebecca. This house is mine. Mine. Bought with my money, paid with my work, deeded in my name. Eleanor Sullivan. Just my name. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca looked at me as if I had spoken in another language. That is ridiculous. Ethan told me this was his house, that he bought it years ago, right? Love? She turned to my son, seeking confirmation. But Ethan had his eyes glued to the floor, his face red with shame. I never said exactly that, he murmured. You assumed, and I did not correct you. Rebecca took a step back as if slapped. What? You let me believe for 3 years that this house was yours? Why would you do that? He finally looked up. I did not want you to think I had nothing, that I lived with my mom in her house. It sounded so pathetic. I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. I bought this house 25 years ago. Rebecca. 25 years working cleaning other people's houses to be able to have one of my own. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously. I saved every penny, denying myself everything to give everything to my son. I paid $95,000 for this property with a loan that took me 25 years to pay off. I moved to the shelf where I had framed photographs. I took an old photo of Ethan as a child. Do you see this boy? This boy wore secondhand clothes because I allocated all my money to the mortgage payment. This boy stayed alone at night because I had to work in a laundry until 11 to be able to pay $540 monthly for 30 years. Tears began rolling down my cheeks, but my voice did not falter. This boy ate rice and beans almost every day because it was the only thing we could afford. This boy grew while I broke my back, destroyed my hands, sacrificed my health so we could have a roof over our heads, a roof that is mine, not yours, mine. Rebecca had turned pale. Her eyes moved frantically from me to Ethan. But you said you paid the mortgage, that you maintained the house. Ethan shook his head, ashamed. I pay the utilities, electricity, water, gas. That is all. The house was already paid off when I married you. It was already paid off, Rebecca's voice broke. So all this time, all the times you bragged to my parents about your house, about your property, were you lying? My son did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. I put down the photograph and took out my phone. Let me show you something, Rebecca. I opened my bank app and showed her the screen. Do you see this receipt? It is from the last payment of my mortgage, dated 2 months ago. $187,000 I paid in total for this house that cost $95,000. That is how loans with 8.5% interest work. Rebecca stared at the screen with glassy eyes. This cannot be true. Ethan, tell her this is not true. But my son could only look at the floor, ashamed. Rebecca slumped onto the sofa, her folder with rules and demands, falling to the floor, forgotten. And now I continued, my voice like cold steel. You who have been living in my house for 3 years without paying a single penny. You who have changed my furniture, who have painted my walls, who have reorganized my kitchen without asking me. You have the nerve to ask me to pay rent, to demand I move to the smallest room, to treat me like a burden in the house I built with my own hands. Tears ran freely down my face now. Do you know how many times I folded sheets until my hands bled to make a payment? How many times I cleaned 5 houses in a day, even though my back screamed in pain? How many nights I went to bed hungry because there was only enough food for Ethan and I had to choose between eating or paying the electricity? Rebecca was sobbing now with her head in her hands. I did not know. I did not know any of this. Ethan should have told me. Should have, I yelled. Should have told you? And what about asking? What about not assuming? What about showing a minimum of respect for the woman who opened the doors of her home to you? I turned to my son. And you who grew up seeing my sacrifice, you who saw me work until I fell exhausted every night, you allowed your wife to treat me like trash. You allowed her to humiliate me, to ask me to pay rent in my own house, to tell me that you support me when I was the one who supported you every day of your life. Mom, I am sorry, whispered Ethan with tears in his eyes. I did not want things to get to this. I just wanted Rebecca to be happy. I wanted her to feel this was her house too. At the cost of it ceasing to be mine, my voice broke. At the cost of making me feel invisible, of erasing my existence, of denying everything I did for you. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. Rebecca cried on the sofa. Ethan trembled, standing with clenched fists. And I, after months of enduring, of keeping quiet, of making myself small, had finally spoken my truth. I had finally defended what was mine. I took my house key out of my pocket. This is my key to my house. I walked to my room, the one Rebecca wanted to convert into a nursery, and opened the closet. From the top shelf, I took out a metal box. I opened it in front of them, revealing the legal documents. Property deed in the name of Eleanor Sullivan, receipts of all payments for 25 years, original loan documents. Everything was there. Rebecca looked at the documents as if they were a death sentence. Her perfect world built on lies and assumptions collapsed before her eyes. Ethan cried openly now, guilt finally catching up to him after months of cowardice. And then with a calm but firm voice, I said the words that would change everything. Now listen to me well, both of you. We are going to establish new rules, my rules, in my house. The silence after my words was absolute. Rebecca was still on the sofa with red and swollen eyes, looking at the property documents scattered on the coffee table as if they were evidence of a crime. Ethan was standing by the window, shoulders slumped and head down, unable to look me in the eyes. I sat in my chair, and took a deep breath before continuing. Rule number 1, I said with a clear and firm voice. This house remains in my name, solely in my name. There will be no transfers. There will be no legal changes. There will be nothing that takes away my ownership of what I paid with my blood and sweat. Ethan nodded without looking up. Rebecca did not move. Rule number 2. If you wish to continue living here, you will do so with respect. Respect for me. Respect for my space. Respect for the decisions I make about my house. The derogatory comments are over. The looks of pity are over. Treating me as if I were a burden is over. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her runny makeup staining her face. Rule number 3, I continued. My room is mine and will remain mine. There will be no remodeling without my consent. There will be no decoration changes without consulting me first. This house has history, has memory, and I will not allow you to erase everything it represents just because it does not fit your vision of modernity. Every old piece of furniture you sold without asking me, Rebecca, every photograph you threw away, every detail you changed, was like ripping pieces of my soul. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I am sorry. I am truly sorry, Eleanor. I did not know. If I had known the history of this house, if Ethan had told me the truth from the start. She turned to my son with resentment. Why did you lie to me? Why did you let me believe everything was yours? Ethan turned to her with tears in his eyes. Because I was afraid. Afraid you would think less of me. Afraid you would not want to marry me if you knew I had nothing of my own. All your ex-boyfriends had houses, cars of the year money. I just had a construction job and lived with my mom. I felt insignificant next to your family with their properties and businesses. So you built a lie, said Rebecca bitterly. And I fell for it like a fool. You made me look like the villain, the evil daughter-in-law who mistreats her mother-in-law, when in reality I was living in her house without even knowing it. Her hands trembled as she spoke. My God, all the times I bragged to my parents, all the times I made comments about Ethan supporting his mother. What shame. I watched this exchange without interrupting. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, of their lies, of their lack of communication. But after a few minutes, I raised my hand asking for silence. I have not finished with the rules yet. Rule number 4, I want apologies. Sincere apologies. Not just empty words, but actions that show you understand the harm you caused me. I looked at Rebecca directly. You have humiliated me for months. You have made me feel invisible in my own house. You have criticized everything I do, everything I am. I want you to understand that I am not your enemy. I never was. I was just a mother trying to coexist with her son's wife. Rebecca nodded with fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. You are right. I have been horrible to you. I projected my own insecurities on you. I was afraid Ethan loved you more than me. I was afraid of being the second option. So I tried to make you small to feel big myself. It was cruel and I was completely wrong. And you, I turned to Ethan. You disappointed me more than anyone. I expected her not to understand that she came from a different world with different values. But you grew up here. You had my sacrifice. You knew how much every brick of these walls cost, and yet you allowed her to treat me like trash. You never defended me. You never took my side. You preferred false peace over real justice. Ethan slumped into a chair, face in his hands. I am a coward. I always was. Since I was a child hiding while you fought the bank for more time to pay, when I pretended to be asleep while you cried in your room from exhaustion. I have never had your strength, Mom, and instead of learning from you, I let my weakness turn me into someone I do not even recognize myself. The wall clock marked 11 at night. We had been in this confrontation for hours. I felt exhausted, but also liberated, as if a weight I had carried for months had finally lifted from my shoulders. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting as always. Now comes the hard part, I said, looking at them both. You have to decide if you can live with these new rules, if you can treat me with the respect I deserve, if you can see this house for what it really is, my legacy, my refuge, my home that I opened to you out of love, not obligation. If the answer is no, if you feel you cannot accept this, then maybe it is time you look for your own place. Rebecca looked at me surprised. Are you kicking us out? I shook my head. I am not kicking you out. I am giving you a choice. You can stay on my terms, or you can go build your own life elsewhere, but I am not going to continue being mistreated in my own house. Those days are over. Ethan stood up and walked toward me. Mom, I want to stay. I want to fix this. I want to make up for all the pain I caused you. Please give me the chance to be the son I should have been. From the beginning. He took my hands in his. The hands he knew since he was a baby when he clung to my fingers while learning to walk. I looked at those hands. They were no longer the small hands of my boy. They were the hands of a grown man calloused from construction work, strong and capable. But in that moment, squeezing mine with desperation, they became, again, the hands of my son who needed me, who wanted to make things right. I will have to see actions, not just words. I told him softly but firmly. Rebecca also approached. Eleanor, I also want to stay. I want to learn from you. I want to really know the extraordinary woman you are. I want you to teach me about sacrifice, about strength, about what it means to build something true with your own hands. And I want someday, when we have children, for them to know their grandmother not as a burden, but as the heroine you really are. Her words sounded sincere, but I had learned to be cautious. Time will tell if what you say is true or just pretty words to calm the storm. Rebecca nodded, understanding. I will prove it to you. Every day I will prove it to you. The following days were of slow but significant changes. Rebecca started asking me before making any changes to the house. She consulted me about meals, about weekend plans, about everything. At first, she did it stiffly, like fulfilling an obligation, but gradually, her attitude softened. She started asking genuine questions about my life, about my history, about how I had managed to buy the house being a single woman. One afternoon, we sat in the kitchen with coffee, and I told her everything from the day I was widowed to the day I made the last mortgage payment. She listened with tears in her eyes, occasionally interrupting to ask questions. When I finished my story, she took my hands. "You are the strongest woman I have met, and I was a fool not to see it before." Ethan changed, too. He started coming home earlier from work to spend time with me. On Sundays, instead of going out alone with Rebecca, he insisted we do things the three of us together. He took me to the flea market where I found an antique rocking chair that reminded me of the one my mother had. We bought it together and put it in my room. "It is yours, Mom," he told me. "So you never forget that this house and everything in it is yours." Not everything was perfect. There were moments of tension, moments where old patterns threatened to return. But now I had a voice. Now I set boundaries. And most importantly, now they listened. A month after our confrontation, Rebecca came home with a large box. She put it on the dining table with a nervous expression. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it," she replied. Inside the box was the old sofa, my sofa, the one she had sold at the garage sale. "I bought it back," she explained. "I had to search the whole neighborhood. The person who bought it did not want to sell it, but I insisted. I paid $300 for something I sold for $50, but it is worth it. Because it is yours, because it has history, because I had no right to get rid of it." I cried when I saw that sofa, not because it was particularly pretty or valuable, but because it represented that she finally understood. She understood that this house was not just a building with walls and a roof. It was a home full of memory, of struggle, of love. That sofa returned to the living room next to the new furniture, a mix of old and new, of past and present, of history and future. 3 months later, Rebecca organized another family gathering, but this time it was different. She prepared the food, she served the plates, she attended the guests. And when her father made a comment about what a nice house we had, Rebecca corrected him immediately. "This is Eleanor's house, Dad. She bought it and paid for it completely alone. Ethan and I have the privilege of living here with her." Leonard's expression was one of surprise. Then he looked at me with new respect. Eleanor, I did not know. Rebecca had given us another impression. "Accept my apologies." His wife Olivia also apologized, ashamed of how she had treated me at the previous gathering. I accepted their apologies with grace because I had learned that forgiveness frees both the forgiver and the forgiven. Now, 6 months after that night, that changed everything. I feel at peace in my house. My true house. Rebecca and I are not best friends, but we have developed a mutual respect. She teaches me about technology and social media. I teach her old recipes and family stories. Ethan has recovered some of the closeness we had when he was a child. Sundays, we cook together like we did before. Will they stay forever? I do not know. Maybe someday they will buy their own house and build their own story, and it will be fine. Because I no longer live with fear of being displaced or devalued. Because now everyone knows the truth. This house is mine. My name is on the papers. My sweat is in every wall. My life is interwoven in every corner. And if there is something I want other women to learn from my story, it is this. Never allow anyone to make you feel small in the space you built. It does not matter who that person is. It does not matter how much they love you or how much they want to keep the peace. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your value is not subject to debate. And your home, the one you built with sacrifice and tears, will always be yours. Today I sit in my rocking chair looking out the window. I am 68 years old. My hands are wrinkled and deformed by arthritis. My back hurts constantly, but I am in my house, and no one never again will make me forget it.